Hi, this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy, and I'm here this morning with Ariana Franco, who we're going to talk about a little bit about why and when and where she started her research, and about the business she started to help others find their roots. So, welcome, Ariana. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much, Bob. I'm happy to be here today.
You're relatively new to research, yes?
I started researching in late 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, and I was I just had a moment. My brother actually it's kind of an interesting story because I did a ancestry DNA test back in 2018. And my brother and I had attempted to get Italian dual citizenship in 2016, and so my brother had done a lot of the research. And on this random October day in 2020, my brother text messaged me a picture of our great grandfather's 1919 naturalization petition, and he kept saying, "We got to figure out who Grandpa's sister was." Grandpa had a sister. We don't know who she is. And so that really, I just took it and I ran. It was pretty incredible, and I haven't stopped since.
Yeah, well, we're all crazy when we start.
Yeah. It was like in 8 hours, I was, emailing back and forth with the second great granddaughter of Chiara Franco, who my dad kept saying, "Oh yeah, I had an Uncle Joe DeMarco," and it just so happened to be Chiara's husband. So we were able to identify her pretty quickly. It was really fun.
So now I did my DNA test a long time ago. What prompted you to do that? Was there something that you weren't sure about your heritage that made you do the test in the first place?
So really, once again, it kind of all leads back to my brother. He his wife was pregnant, going to have their first child, and he wanted to see, what the ancestry DNA test was going to come up for us. And so he got it for me for Christmas and had me do it.
Oh,
So that was,
cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it came back. It came back pretty. The ethnicity estimates came back really true to what we were told. My father is 100% Italian, and then my mother is French Canadian Acadian.
Oh,
So
cool. Neat.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So
That's a
got a
cool
little bit of
mix.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good mix. Yeah, and I haven't done any research on my maternal side. I've really, really focused on my research with my Italian family because we knew nothing. We knew nothing. My brother had conversations um, with our granduncle Carmen before he died, and really funny. This is a good story. I actually have the notes from the phone call in like 2005, and it says Punta Gorda, and I was going Punta Gorda, and I'm like, that's in Florida. Like, what's happening here? And it was because he wanted to say Pontecorvo in Italy, Pontecorvo, and so we had to do a little bit of detective work to really flush out and tease out that information. It was really funny.
And the French Canadian side, that will be interesting once you get around to it because they have some
Hmm.
interesting roots because there's a mix between there and some wound up in New Orleans, and you might be able to get back to France someplace also. So,
Yeah, absolutely. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother, she actually did contract a professional genealogist to do the family history. And I have the results of that. I have the paperwork that was like done in like the 90s, in the 1990s. So it's a project for later. Once I, feel ready to move over there. The Italian stuff though is still so many mysteries, so many unresolved, family lore that I have.
yeah, well,
So,
that happens to a lot of us. So
yeah.
what, if anything, interesting have you found about the Italian side?
Oh my goodness. So, not only have I found two people who were adopted out of my family and welcomed them back in, I have my dad kept saying that they went to Altoona. They were like, "Oh, we went to Altoona, Pennsylvania," and I was like, why were you going to Altoona, Pennsylvania? And so I talked to my uncle John, and he was like, oh yeah. I was like, do you remember who you visited? And he said, this guy Baj. He just kept saying this guy Baj. I'm like, oh, Baj. So I did a little bit of research, and then I was able to, when they finally published the Pontecorvo records on Antonati pretty recently. This was like in March. I was able to take what I believed was our ancestor in Altoona and trace it back to Pontecorvo. And I was able to identify who Baj was, and uh, and it was actually my great grandfather's aunt's son. So it was his first cousin. Pretty cool.
Oh, that's yeah, that's neat.
Yeah,
And
that's like really fun.
and I had a similar revelation. You mentioned, adopted cousins.
Hmm.
I this oh boy, it's probably at least 7, 8 years ago. Somebody not through Ancestry. I don't know if it was My Heritage or one of those other sites where I had sent the DNA, and somebody popped up as a second cousin. So now I'm thinking, like, who could this be? Uh,
Hmm.
this, you know, nobody I could think of other than one of my cousins was messing around someplace,
Yeah.
and so it's going through my head, like, okay, who was it?
Yeah.
Who am I going to pin this on? And so, and I couldn't figure it out. And so we
Oh.
communicated a couple of times, and I said, if you ever do Ancestry, let me know. And then, because a lot of people on Ancestry, so she finally
Hmm.
did it. And I kept thinking that this was probably from my mother's side, but it wasn't. It was from my father's side, my first cousin on my father's side.
Hmm.
And all three of his children had done Ancestry.
So you got good matches. You
Yeah.
were, oh,
And they had no clue.
yep.
So, uh, we figured it out, and I went to my cousin Donna and I said, "Have you seen?" She goes, "I've seen it," and but they've been in contact, um,
Hmm.
and they've it's not her fault, of course. I mean,
Yeah.
but I asked my cousin. I said, "Did you have any idea?" And she told me the only thing that she could remember is when she was about 5 or 6, her mother crying in the bedroom for 2 weeks.
Oh no. Okay.
And that would have been right around the time
Yeah.
that um her half sister was born. Uh and they grew up in Queens,
Right
probably
down the street
within,
from each
yeah,
other. Yeah.
not probably
Yeah.
not far. And yeah, so I know a lot of people don't want to do the DNA because they don't want to know.
Right. Right. Which is like totally, everybody's own choice. I got really lucky. My dad, I actually use his DNA. I having the French Canadian Acadian side with the amount of endogamy and pedigree collapse. I have so many matches that I have limited matches on my Italian side. So I was very, very fortunate. My dad was willing to test on 23andMe and on Ancestry, and I'm able to use his DNA to do more research. To really further the research with my Italian side. So, and I did want to mention another really cool story about how I was able to connect with my cousin Nadia, um, who was from Biolatina. She's currently living in LA. Um, I because you understand, we jump into this research, we go down these rabbit holes, and you never know what you're going to find. My dad's mother, her family is from Biolatina and Villa Santa Croce. And then my grandfather, he's from Pontecorvo. So I decided to go down, and see what was going on with my grandmother. And there was all this family lore. Like my great grandmother was born in Newcastle, Pennsylvania in 1904. And I was like, this is wild. I was like, Dad, did Carmela, did she even speak English? I mean, he's like, no, her English was horrible. Like she came from Italy. And so because there was so much conflicting information, I was like, okay, let's figure this out. And and I was able to find that my second great grandmother, Filomena Franco, because I got double Francoed from two different parts of Italy. Super fun there. She actually did come to America at a very, very young age with her family. And she was married in Newcastle, Pennsylvania in 1901 to Giovanni Nacca. And Giovanni Nacca was like living in Ohio, had come over pretty early, but they were from the same village. So I decided to trace that whole line back. And I found Francesco Nacca, who is my grandmother's brother. And so I was like, okay, like, did he come to America? Is he still in Italy? Right? Because I'm trying to find as many people as I can. And if I go to Italy, I want to know who's living there. And I figured out he actually came to LA in the 1960s. And he had a son, Edward, who, came shortly after him. And so he's like an adult at that point. He was born in 1936, I think. And I was able to find his naturalization paperwork. And so I did a little sleuthing and I figured out that he might still be living. He was like 82 at the time. And I was like, okay, he might be living in LA. And I found his phone number and I got up the courage to give him a call. It was like one of those things where I was like, oh my God, am I going to call? Is this guy going to hang up on me? Like, how do I explain like who I am and like how we're related and this and that? So I call him and I call him on a landline. I do my best to explain, to like write it out, explain how we're related. And I kept saying, my grandmother, is your cousin, whatever. And he's like, and Johnny and Danny. And I was like, yeah, the Barbieris. And he's like, I was so close to Johnny and we're cousins and this is amazing. And he talked to me and he told me about his life in Italy, during World War II and, these really magical stories. And then he mentions that he has a daughter who's around my age who is living in Italy. And I was able to find her on Instagram and we talk like every day. And so then I was able to get some family photos and some other things from them that I don't have. So it was really, really incredible, an incredible moment for me. That is like my research is working. It's like it's doing the other work, right?
Yeah, I say this all the time. I'm a firm believer in there are no accidents. That these things are meant to be found.
Absolutely, and meant to be shared too, right? Because I was doing all this research, and I'm like, well, who do I share this with? Like, who's gonna care about all of this work that I'm doing? And that was really, what was a pivotal moment for me in like, understanding genealogical writing, and wanting to come up with ways for me to share this research. Like, how do I share this research? And in a clear, concise way, which I am not. Like when I go like, I'm very I get excited, right? I'm passionate. It gets confusing. I'm sure you've had those conversations where you're trying to explain something, but there's so many people involved in the story.
Yeah.
And some of them have the same name, right? Because naming traditions get very confusing with Italian research. It's like I go, I got a Giovanni, a Francesco, a Giovanni, a Francesco, and I'm like, okay, okay, their father was Giuseppe. Great, like finally a name change on the lineage.
No, I know exactly what you mean. And my mom's uncle, there were 4 Dominics that passed away before him in the same family.
Yep.
And they just,
Mm-hmm.
I found this and I was like, okay, at what point do you finally give up? And apparently they didn't. One finally survived after 4.
Yeah. I realize that that was happening. It was kind of an interesting like revelation that I was like, oh, okay, they just namesake them.
Yeah.
They just keep namesaking. And this also happened in my family where, and it was kind of a big family story. My grandfather, Antonio Franco, um, we called him Grandpa Tony. I actually didn't get to meet him. There's pictures of him holding me as a baby, but he died when I was 2. So I never, had a relationship with him. But the family story is that he had a brother who died. So that was 2 years old when he died, and his name was Carmen, and he was born in 1918. And my grandpa, so he was hit by a car while they were playing outside, and my grandpa had to pick him up. My grandpa must have been about 5 at the time. Picked him up and tried to bring him home so that they could get him to the hospital, and he ended up dying. And and when I was looking at the naturalization paperwork for my great grandfather, it started to make sense because there was a Carmen who was born in 1918. But then my grandfather's youngest brother, Carmen, who was born in 1924, was the namesake. And so I was able to clarify a lot of that, when we start to, I was like, oh, this is not the same. The birth date is not incorrect for Carmen. It's that it wasn't another son, you know?
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with philitaly.com. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co. Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned earlier about the DNA matches and everything like that. And
Yeah.
I I don't have a lot, especially with some of the names in Italy here in America, because the Italians they don't do DNA. But my wife is
No.
half my wife is half Puerto Rican, and she's
Oh.
got thousands and thousands and
Hmm.
thousands of cousins.
So many. So many. Yeah, I know. I really like, I urge anybody listening who's Italian American, if you haven't done a DNA test, like go for it, read about it. It's safe. Don't, the direct to consumer databases, Ancestry, 23andMe is not going to use your information for legal, law enforcement, anything like that. Genealogy is incredible, um, for traditional genealogical research. I am such a fan of it, and I utilize it as much as I can, um, and especially with this family lore and legend, right? Like who's related to who? My dad kept saying there was this guy Jeech, right? So this is how it all starts, right?
But
Is that
there's
like my
a
family
Cheech
knows
in every family. You know that, right?
and yeah, yeah, there's a Jeech in every family. And it's so funny because like when I work with my clients, they're like, "Oh, I don't know." Like I had a client who was like, "All I know is that my grandmother, I called her Nan Bubby," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, totally, we'll figure her out, no biggie." Because like I started with like Cheech and Baj, right? Like, how it like, how are you gonna figure those out? And my dad just kept saying, this guy Cheech," and I was looking at some Find a Grave. I was on Find a Grave, and I was looking at the headstone for my great grandfather, and he's buried with a Luigi Forlini, and then his wife, who ended up marrying Luigi Forlini, who is our Jeech. He is our Jeech. And then there's some other DNA stuff that's going on. We have I have a great grandparent level, non-paternal event that I'm trying to work out right now, where one of my second cousins, might be a half second cousin situation. Um, and so I was able to, follow. Jeech never had children, but Jeech was like the most likely character to have, been involved, right? And but I knew he had a brother, and so I was able to, trace his brother's lineage back to living people. And I reached out to this woman on Facebook and I said, "Have you taken an ancestry DNA test? I know that you're on Ancestry, but I don't match with you." have you done it? And she said yes. And I said okay. And I went to my second cousin. And I said, we got to get you on Ancestry, and I'm going to be able to make a determination on that, because no record will ever prove it. Unfortunately, it was a 19 centimorgan match, way too low for what I was
Mhm.
looking for. And, the quest is on. Um, but yeah, I mean, it happens. It totally, totally happens.
I had a similar kind of thing where I was, I'm trying to think if Linda got me through Ancestry. I think she did, but she hadn't done DNA yet.
Mm.
And she said, I think we're researching the same person, Maria Piomalo. And I said, yes, we are. I said, that's my grandmother's aunt. And I had never knew that my grandmother had any family here, but I finally pieced this all together.
Hmm.
And I said, she said, are you sure? I said, there's no question about it. The ages match up. I know my grandfather, that's Sister Maria. I said, I'm positive. So she did the ancestry test and she contacts me and she says, it came back negative, that we don't match. And I said, well, let me look. And I looked and I said, well, you match on mine. So I don't know what happened. And she contacted them and apparently, I don't know how, but they made some sort of mistake or something like that.
Oh,
Um,
weird.
yeah. But the amazing thing about it was, and I've talked about this a little bit in some of the other podcasts. Our families were connected through the 20s and 30s and 40s, even up into the 60s, even up to the 70s, and we had no idea. It
Yep.
was,
Yeah, sounds
it
about
was
right. Yeah.
it was kind of just lost. And
Yeah.
to your point about living near somebody, her cousin lived with the grandmother in Flushing, Queens, and she said she used to be there all the time in the 60s and 70s. Well, when I married my first wife, we lived 5 blocks from them,
Oh my gosh.
and I kind of remember my father saying, as we were driving past this house, Aunt Beatrice lives there. And you know how Italians are. It was actually my
Hmm.
father's
Yeah,
cousin,
yeah,
but
yeah.
Aunt Beatrice.
Right.
And I was 21 and went right over my head. Aunt Beatrice, whatever, right? Um, and the other just thing that just happened, well, like I said, there aren't many accidents. My father's grandfather had a second family in Italy, 30 years apart. He married a woman 30 years younger than him after my great grandmother passed away. And on Facebook, just 2 months before we went there, I got contacted by my father's half first cousin,
Hmm.
same name as my father, Nicola. My father was Nicholas, and we're trying to get um, a citizen. I'm trying to get the citizenship, and they haven't been able to come up with my grandparents' marriage and my grandmother's birth record. So I said, you know what? I'm sure they were married in Cherkala. I thought my grandmother was born in Naples. So I said, well, I'm going to ask Nicola. Well, I have nothing to
Hmm.
lose. A week ago, I what app him? What apped him? What's apped him? and and I said, because I know he doesn't live far from Cherkala. So I said, would you mind? Do you have the time to go check or call them or something? And he got right back to me. He said, I have an appointment there on Monday. He went this past Monday. He found the marriage record and my
Yep.
grandmother's birth record, and my grandmother was born in Cherkala. Um,
Wow.
so we've been waiting. I've been waiting for these documents. Oh, I've been waiting personally to try and find them on the Antonati for 15 years. Uh,
Right, right.
but the lawyers were trying to find it, and they couldn't come up with it. And within a week, I have these 2 documents that was so hard to find. So I guess the moral to that story is don't give up. It's out there. You have to just
Yeah.
keep looking for it.
Yep. You really do. And that's the thing is don't give up. And um one of the things that spurred my brother to, do some genealogical research and connect with our family was he lived with two Italian-born men in during college, and they became his really good friends. And so that he was going to Italy in the summers and spending time in Italy with their families. And so he was able to figure out, and go and meet some of our family in Villa Santa Croce. And he came back from these experiences, really wanting to do the Italian dual citizenship. And he we made the attempt. I was not heavily involved. I wasn't interested in this stuff in 2015, 2016. I was doing other things. I was, very much focused on my art career at the time. And we, you know, we were denied. Well, we weren't denied. We needed to do some homework, and we didn't have. I wasn't aware of this. It was kind of a what to do, how to do the homework for them to get the missing records, or the extra things that the consulate was asking for, and we let it slip. And so we had to make new appointments. And so I'm rebuilding right now. I was able to get all of the documents back from the consulate, and I'm rebuilding our application right now on my own. He had hired somebody to do it. He was very busy at the time, getting married,
Mhm.
successful career, and which was the right thing to do, was to hire somebody, at the time. And so now I'm taking the time to just do it on our own. And so we have an appointment with Miami Consulate in 2025.
Oh, it's way. Yeah,
Yeah,
see, I can't wait that long. But
yeah.
what's funny was when we were in Italy this past June, um, I may have found out about Giovanni before then, but I'm not. I think I may have known. Um, but I have a cousin through my paternal grandmother, two cousins actually, that live in San Diego. Had no idea, and one of them is an attorney at the consulate in
Oh
California.
my gosh, stop it.
so,
Oh, you're
so
so lucky.
we're in the cousin's house in Italy, and his mother calls him. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning in California, and I said, "Why?" And he said, "Oh, my mother." And he told me, "When you get the paperwork done, call me, let me know." So I have my fingers crossed that we were going to get this done sooner. But I don't know if you're aware, there are two other ways of getting it quicker. One is once you have all the paperwork done, you could go live in Italy for 45 days and establish
Correct.
residency. The
Yep.
second is because they're so far behind, you could also petition the court in Italy to move it ahead because they supposedly, and I don't know if they've changed it, but at one time there was a law that they had to do this within a certain amount of time and they can't meet it. So when you have
Right.
everything done, it might be worth, exploring that if you want to try and get it quicker. 2025 is a long time to wait for
It's a
anybody.
very long time. I know. I know. It is. I might need that much amount of time to get some of these additional records because everything is so backed up. Everything, vital records, getting a pastille, getting,
Mhm.
all of this. So we actually had quite a bit of missing records, and mostly focused around our father. So I've you know figured out exactly what it is, and I'm also, because we qualify on two lines. So we qualified both through Villa Santa Croce and Pontecorvo. And I have this weird like obsession with Pontecorvo. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because they're so mysterious. Um that I really I'm gonna rebuild our application to go through that comune. I want my birth certificate in Pontecorvo, and I don't know if that's because of my surname or just a lot of mystery there. Just so much. I don't know. I feel mostly connected. I don't know if you've ever felt that, like where you kind of like
Uh,
feel a little bit more
you haven't been there yet.
connected.
You haven't
I
been there yet, right?
haven't.
Yeah. Wait till you
No.
go. You want to feel connected? Wait till you go
Yes.
there.
Trust me. I know. My brother keeps telling me, he's like, it's a whole experience. The whole
It's
experience, and I know. And it's on my list. It's on my list for 2023, to get over there, and even if it's, for a week, 5 minutes, I don't care. um but one of my things is like, I'm gonna, I need to make an appointment at the comune. I want to go look at some very old records. I need a little bit more details on what's going on over there. That so Pontecorvo is south of Monte Cassino, and Monte Cassino was bombed during
Mhm.
World War II, and the entire village of Pontecorvo also, and except for the bridge. The bridge still exists. That was built in the 6th century. So it's just incredible. It's all about that bridge. It's just one of those things. So, I'm having a little bit of fun. I'm trying to have some fun with the dual citizenship stuff, because otherwise I get too overwhelmed. I'm like, oh, if I take it too serious, it has to be this, this, and this. I'm like, it can be this, this, and this, but I can have fun while I go to get these records, while I, mail out all
Yeah.
of this paperwork, to Italy, while I'm doing that stuff. I can enjoy it. It's very satisfying when it happens, but it is such a difficult long road, to get Italian dual citizenship, especially in a case like mine, where, my father was married twice before my mother. There's a missing divorce, that we can't find, that nobody can find, stuff like that. My grandfather was married before my grandmother, and so there's a lot of that happening, that makes it a little bit more challenging. And then also the Pontecorvo records that may or may not, exist as originals, but as duplicates with a lot of errors. So
You
that's
have a real challenge. I qualify
you got to,
through
yeah,
both parents too.
yeah.
The interesting thing is I qualify through both parents, but my brother doesn't, because my brother was born in 46 and I was born in 51. So he, it's the
Autumn,
strangest thing. So he
yo,
doesn't qualify
yes,
through the maternal line.
yes. Oh my gosh, yeah, because of the 1948 cases.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But I really want to get it through my paternal side. I guess maybe because I'm a male, I just has that thing.
Yeah,
But
it's a whole journey.
yeah, it is. And so I want to, talk about how you segued all of this into a business, because you weren't originally trained, and as you said, you had no
Yep.
interest in this, 6 or 7 years ago. So what happened?
What happened? Well, the first thing that happened was through my research, really wanting to build proper reports. The very first book that I ever read on genealogy is the Genealogy Standards. I read it front to back, highlighted, to understand the genealogical proof standard. And then I realized that was professional level understanding of genealogical research. And I knew that I wanted to do more than just my own personal research. I had people reaching out to me, friends. Oh, can you figure this out for me? Where's my family from in Italy? Stuff like that. And so I decided that I would get educated, that I would do some more formal education. I hold a certificate of genealogical research from Boston University now. I got that last year, and I'm involved in the ProGen study group. So I'm doing that. That ends in June, so I'll have a certificate in that. And so I knew I wanted to help people. I knew I wanted to do this, and I knew that this could be my life's work. And understanding how to become a professional genealogist just made sense to me. And so I'm in a transitional period of taking clients. I have some incredible clients. I have an incredible client right now that we're doing some work on his family in Salerno. Um, and it just felt right. When something just feels right, where it's like,
Yeah.
this is challenging and interesting, but I want to do it. It's the first time in my life that I felt that way. So I just have taken it, and I've just been running. It kind of happened. It fell into place.
Well, and it
So
does become an obsession. When I first started,
absolutely.
I just really wanted to, find my family, because I always liked history and looking at old pictures and things like that. And it
Hmm.
was fun. But then I guess it's 4 years now, I guess 2018. To me, it was fun, but I wanted to share it. I had to,
Hmm.
tell other people for some odd reason. I had to share this stuff. And
Yep.
that's when I started the blog. And then after that, that was great, but it was one way.
Hmm.
I wasn't hearing anybody else's stories. So that's
Hmm.
why I started doing the podcast and the YouTube, because, everybody's stories are similar, but they're unique,
Yep.
if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And like I said before, everybody has a Cheech in the family and things
Yeah.
like that. Um, and I've just heard so many incredible stories, which is, you know, why I just had to do this because of these stories were so profound and not accidental. There's no way that they could be a coincidence. Some of the things that
Yeah.
I've heard, it's just impossible. Finally, and it was hard, but I finally wound up writing my book and getting it published. And um, hopefully people will be spurred on by that to do their own research because a lot of people, I think it's hard. I did a mix. I started on my own. I did have some roadblocks, so eventually I did, um, hire somebody to help me get through some of those roadblocks.
Yep.
But that in of itself then was able to get me deeper into it because of some of the things that they found. So I think sometimes it's a mix and match.
Absolutely, and I think that it can be a mix and match, and it doesn't have to just be professional, hiring a professional. It doesn't just have to be like you trying to figure it out on your own. There is absolutely can be a balance between the two. There are just people, and I've talked about this a little bit throughout, our conversation today. Is that I like these uber complex, like, I don't know the real name of so and so. Those are like my favorite. Or I have this family lore client comes to me and says, "My grandmother says that her father was born in Sicily." And then I go and I do a little bit of research because they can't figure it out, or they don't want to pay for the ancestry and try to figure it out, and this, that, and another thing. And I come back to them and I tell them, nope, that's family lore. I've disproved it. Here's your report. And then they get excited, and then they're like, oh, but oh, now let's keep going. Let's keep going. Or I can hand it over and say, now you can go and try to piece some other things together. And that's a lot of it for me. I also, I had a friend, DNA. I keep coming back to DNA. I'm a big fan of it because I don't just do Italian research. I have done German, Irish, some other ethnicities. And I had a friend who came to me and he said, "I don't think my dad was who he said he was."
Mm.
Right. And I was like, okay. And I look at his, I'm like, okay, sign this DNA informed consent form, give me your logins, like, attach me on this stuff and let me see what I can find. And within 5 hours, I was like, your dad had two other families and changed his identity in 1955. And like,
Wow.
there's no other way to prove it but without the DNA. Right. So I love this. He'd been trying to figure it out for 5 years. And I figured it out in 5 hours, right? So that's kind of like a bit of a difference with understanding what's going on in certain aspects and just trying to do it yourself and running around in circles, roadblocks, and we talk about roadblocks. I have brick walls that I'm just like dumbfounded about, right? Like I've got my third great grandmother on the marriage certificate, no father listed, no idea. She comes to America. She goes, she's just completely missing. Can't find a death certificate for her in Pennsylvania. Can't find anything. And I got mystery people. We all have mystery people. But it doesn't mean I'm not going to give up on them. But I might go talk to another professional genealogist and say, "Hey, have you come across something similar?" Like, and it's a community. And I
It
believe
is,
that,
yeah.
whether it's, professional or not, it's still a community and we get to help each other. I
Yeah.
love that.
If you haven't heard it yet, check out my interview with Carla Davis because she does a lot of the DNA genealogy stuff, and
Yeah.
she's really, really a super person. Um, and
Amazing.
and and sometimes you just have to ask because I interviewed Paul now. He's one of the executives. He's with Family Search,
Mm, love Family
and
Search.
yeah, and I've done several interviews with him. And he told me a story where he was going to speak in Pennsylvania, and his grandmother came from New Jersey, and he couldn't find. I believe it was either her birth record or marriage record, but he was looking for a piece of documentation, and he couldn't find it. Same thing, just stuck.
Yeah.
And he said, before I left, he said, I looked up and I said, Grandma, help me find this certificate. Help me find this thing. He goes to the conference and he's in the booth and he looks over and he sees a woman that's name tag says that she was some sort of executive director or something from the archives in New Jersey or whatever. So he said,
Hmm.
I'll ask, right?
Yep.
So he said he asked her about it, gave her the name and everything. And he said she almost kind of like just like brushed me off. He said, but I figured I asked. The next day he said, waiting to go in and give my talk. And she comes up to me with an envelope. And she so told me, don't open this until after you talk. And it was the record that he was looking for.
He was looking for. Yeah. Yep.
These aren't, they're not coincidences. They can't be.
They can't be. They absolutely can't be. And that's such an incredible story because, we'll look for things for many years, for a long time. It's happened to you. I have my list right now and the years are gaining on me as I, you know, have, bit, new to the game here. But it's keep that list and don't give up. Those archives, big fan. I early in my research, within like my first 3 months, my great grandfather has he was denied his first naturalization petition in 1919. So then he had to go back. He went back in 1922, and he got his American citizenship. And there's a guy on there, one of the witnesses, Patsy Rose, and I was like, "Who's this Patsy Rose? Like, how come there's a bunch of naturalization petitions where Patsy Rose is a witness?" I'm like, he must have been like a big shot in Bridgeport at the time, like he's like the dude. And so I start doing a little bit of research into Patsy Rose, and I'm like, this guy's incredible. I pull up a newspaper article, and it says Patsy Rose murdered, 1928 Halloween night outside of a pool room in the east side of Bridgeport, which was the Italian neighborhood. And I'm going, oh my goodness. So I start emailing Bridgeport, archives, the police record archives, and I'm like, would there be any, records? Would there be a police report, pertaining to Patsy Rose's murder? And unfortunately, they had burned. It becomes burned records, but there might be something at the Connecticut State library, which that's a whole nother project within itself, right? Is getting out there. But if I can't get there, because this is all in-person research, like when we talk about archives, we're talking about in-person research at that point. This stuff is not just going to be online. You're not going to just be able to go on Family Search and find it, or Ancestry, stuff like that. And I've considered hiring somebody to go do record retrieval for me, and just go do the search for me in person, because I don't have the time, and fortunately, unfortunately, to go and do some of that personal research that I really want to be doing, without dedicating a little bit of time. Also, both my family lives in Connecticut, so it's can't just go and do research. I'm gonna have to go and visit too, which is amazing. Would be great. Would love that. Yeah, archives.
I would spend a year in Italy just buried in old books if I had the
Right.
opportunity to do that.
I know. We should. I was just talking to somebody about that, and I was just like, "Oof!" Like when I get to Italy, because my list is so long. My list
Yeah.
is so long of everything that I want to go look at, and I've got to go to the comunes, but I'm also going to need to go to the state archives. So I'm going to need to go to state archives, not just in Frosinone, but also in Caserta. So I've got a lot of work to do there. But like, what a joy, what a blessing! Like to shout out to anybody who has had the opportunity to go and spend months in those
Yeah,
records.
yeah,
Like,
and
oof,
I envy I envy some of the people over there that I know that do research because they're in these
mhm,
places all the time, and
all the time. It's normal.
it's
Yeah.
just incredible. We were in the state archives of Naples because my grandmother
Mm,
comes from two noble families, and so they
right.
let us go in there and they brought us into places that you normally couldn't get into, and they actually had one of their researchers go through some of the Caracciolo archives and papers, and
Right.
the oldest record from one of my ancestors was from 1100. And what was amazing about it, we always watch these shows and they're in museums and they have white gloves and everything. Italy, they have none of
Mhm.
that. They
No, nope.
just go through, just go through
They're
everything.
just paging right through those. Yep.
This thing's 1,000 years old, and he's just flipping through it and showing me, and
Like it's just
incredible
a
stuff.
regular old book. Yep.
Yeah, and then in Avellino, we were in the church, and they said there were 3 chairs there, and they said those are the chairs that the family would sit in 1600 at mass. And so Letizia, who did the tour for us, she said, "Can they sit in the chairs?" Sure, I sit in the chairs.
Just sit in the chairs. No biggie.
No big deal. Just go sit in the chairs. But yeah, you have to go. You can't explain it. You just can't
Nope.
explain the experience to people. It's that wonderful. So before we go, if somebody wants to use your services, how do they get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So, if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can go to www.arianafranco.com. That is my website. Or you can just shoot me an email, hello@arianafranco.com. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, the whole bit. But those are going to be the best ways to get in contact with me.
And I'll put all the links on the blog and everything.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much. I could do this for another 4 hours, but
I know. Same.
we
Got
all
to
have
cut us
things to
off
do.
at some point, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But I really appreciate you taking the time.
So much. Really appreciate you invited me on the show.